Welcome to Rauta's opinion videos. This time it's time to talk about mainstream festival getting a little bit sketchy. Now, as it is, and I didn't even remember this first, but last year already, I was talking about mainstream festivals going south, but in a very, very different fashion than this time. So it's kind of ironic how the winds have turned in a way and at the same time remained the same. Now, this needs an explanation, and I'm gonna give it to you without you the force to watch the previous video from last November or so about Tuska festivals and others that have pretty much kind of abandoned their major principles, being open air metal festivals and all that stuff for money. Now, it's kind of a given, pretty much so, that bigger metal festivals, they are not, the kind of organizations that are doing welfare or anything like that. They are major businesses. Not major like, Microsoft or Amazon, obviously, but still, they are there to make money. And when the ownership tends to be something else than a group of people, like a small band of people like organizing together, organizing a festival for it, it is really something that is business. Major in the sense that there are lots of people, probably dozens and dozens, with the volunteers included, maybe even three-figure number, the people amount there. But that's not the thing here. What I'm talking about is that, of course, these kind of festivals tend to change their nature through the course. So whatever started as something like, hey, let's create an event so people can see the bands we like, and everybody is kind of into the game for the rather obvious reason, not to make money, but to celebrate metal music or whatever the genre is. Now, in my last year's video, I was mentioning how Tuska, among others, have pretty much gone softer and softer every year. And with Tuska, it especially marks the COVID era. I mean, 2019, and you had Slayer and Anthrax and Dimmu Borgir, kind of those badass names in terms of metal. Of course, there are always softer bands, but when you scroll back to the, late 90s when Tuska started, and even very, very long for early 2000s, it was always pretty much all the way metal. Suddenly, at some point, bands started to, kind of get into, synthwave, or there were folkier artists, but anyway, the focus was like at least 90%, 95% metal and all that stuff. This year it was more like 50%. And I'm basing these numbers on what are accepted to Metal Archives, so take it with a grain of salt. I mean, Metal Archives as such is not an authority or anything like that, but it kind of is a useful tool to figure out where some act is metal. Yes, there are acts which are not metal, and obviously some metalcore bands and deathcore bands haven't been really added to the base, even though they might be really very metallic. But this is not about Metal Archives. This is just to point you out that it has really become more of a rock and roll festival or more generic festival. They even abandoned the kind of a metal subtitle, whatever it's called, from the underscore, whatever it is. I don't know. Anyway, they kind of abandoned that from the whole title and just became Tuska. And in a way, there's nothing wrong with that because, like I mentioned in my previous video, that kind of paved the way for some newcomers, and that's pretty good. I mean, you new people, youngsters, youth, new generation of rockheads, metalheads, whatever, they can still go to Tuska. And we others, we go to other places. But this time, it was kind of hilarious that they actually managed to book one of the really sketchy ones. And this time it's Slaughter to Prevail. They're a Russian band that has been relocated to United States for so many years, but they have always been kind of a troublemaking band in so many ways. This time that really kind of put them on the map, and in a negative way. Now, I guess this is where I just put this on the background and you don't have to watch my face. So, Slaughter to Prevail's Alex Turnbull addressed backlash for waving Russian flag at DC Warp Tour. Now, this is curious because obviously some 3 years ago Russia invaded Ukraine. This is where it comes very, very political, even if I don't like that. And because of that, anything related to Russia, be it big companies putting stuff on sales there or, having factories in Russia or whatever, there was a big debate how European countries should stop doing that. So in order to support Ukraine and showing their, support. And there are lots of big companies who decided not to do business at all in Russia. They would even dismantle their factories or just stop them working and move the hell out of that. In order to be kind of a unified thing. Now, obviously, some people consider money more important than that, and so they kind of decided to, turn a blind eye to it and decide like, hey, we're still gonna do business with Russia no matter what is happening. But there's one thing that you do as a corporation and one thing that you do as an artist. Now I get it. Alex Turble and probably the rest of the guys, they probably are, in love with their home country. So you can't really bitch about that. I mean, after all, even if you're like a side of those bitch ass invaders, I mean, I get it. There are people who love their country so much, though they can't be nationalistic no matter what's going on. So, yes, I understand it, even if it doesn't resonate with me. I'm not that person. But what happens is when you marry that idea to a band, like for instance, in this case, waving a Russian flag on stage to the audience. So you're kind of taking the side. In this case, it is about, Russia and the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin. And of course, they get backlash for that. Despite whatever Donald Trump has been going on with, Putin back and forth, like sometimes they're friends and then they're not, and all that stuff. How this is relevant to Tuska is, of course, well, the band was one of the headliners at Tuska. So people were suddenly like, okay, you're supposed to be the safe space, mainstream, metal event, where black metal is virtually non-existent at this point. Not even most death metal bands play there. So it has become something more like family-friendly event, where there are bands that are like, very woke in that sense. So obviously you're not supposed to see any kind of Nazis, right? I mean, they belong to the marginal events, and people are always, very, very careful to see what kind of bands are accepted to this and that festival. Even a lot of black metal festivals are like very, very careful to choose, like, can this band play there, or do they have connections to some NSBM band? Are there connections to other people who are deemed to be dangerous or whatever? All that stuff. I mean, I get it. I understand people are very scared of Nazis. And for good reason. I mean, if you consider what happened in the 1940s. Now fast forward to 2020s. And basically that's what Russia has been doing. It's like 1940s, but this time Russia are being the bad guys. And like I said, a lot of corporations had made sure they have nothing to do with that. So when a Russian band or band with a Russian background waving national flag and openly like supporting that stuff is put on the main stage as one of the headliners, obviously some eyebrows are gonna move. Which leads us to the Finnish mainstream media, Yle, government-owned media, which is known for neutrality. Well, most of it anyway. So when they are headlining, Russian metal band appearance at Tuska Festival draws protest. For you, dear audience, I chose the English version of the news. Obviously, I read Finnish news, but the same thing, just for more convenient language for you. So you start seeing these people, rioting in a way. They were making sure that do not have this band, blah, 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 because it supports genocide and all that stuff. And the news goes about that, protesting people. Okay, this was maybe not a big thing, but this is one of the rare occasions where the audience actually gave a middle finger to the audience. I mean to the band on stage, not the audience. So what is curious is that suddenly when you're big enough, and this goes for the bands too, when you're too big to fall, nothing really happens. There is no major backlash. If you're a smaller event, yeah, you can attack that, you can threaten them, you can make sure that certain bands don't come to play, blah, blah, blah. Threats are made, moves are made, and all that stuff. Where it gets even trickier is that someone managed to dig some older pictures by Alex Terrible where he's actually wearing a Nazi officer hat, and he has this, black sun tattoo. Curious now, I happen to have a Satanic War Master shirt there. Just pure coincidence. Either way, the thing is, they were having this very same, tattoo, which is then again often connected to, people related to NSBM scene. So not only he's, kind of supporting Russia and, showing their support for this ex-old home country, but he is also, having this rather sketchy past. So is he supposed to be twice as sketchy as your typical NSBM stuff? Now, obviously, this is not about NSBM. I'm not defending to it at all. I'm just merely pointing out how ironic it is, how selective people can really be when they're going for that. Now, at least they protested, so there was some kind of action. But the funny thing is, when you are the biggest metal festival in Finland, what you do is just shrug it off. You can say, oh, we didn't see that coming and we told not to wave that flag, which I guess they didn't. Still, however, they were booked. Why? Because they're a big band. They have a lot of audience. Could the festival have called it off like some other festivals actually made quite quickly? They commented. We had booked them a couple of years ago, but once we figured out what they are, we cancelled them. But Tuska didn't. Why? First and foremost, like I said, it's a big corporation, and now I'm probably burning my bridges to Tuska. They probably won't ever want to see my face there because I'm making this video and I'm willing to take the risk. Why? Because the truth needs to be out there. And secondly, well, I don't really care what Tuska is doing nowadays because it's not really the festival that it used to be, where I have been many, many, many times. I wish it was, but it's not. So if this is burning the bridges, so fucking be it. I can live without it. Now, obviously, it bothers me that Tuska has become this kind of festival who just not only abandoned the metal roots, but also kind of sacrificed all these values, if you will, to something called money. I mean, it kind of emphasizes the very fact that this is business. You really can't put it more there than this way. I mean, of course, you could also add Amazon, Microsoft, on Google, and all kind of banners right there to make it more obvious. But I mean, it's already known that it's owned by some kind of an investment company, not by people who created it. So things have changed a lot. And when you have these bigger festivals hosting these kind of sketchy bands, I think it kind of feels so weird. At the same time, smaller festivals are being targeted for this and that band. But when you have festival, it's probably having like 60,000 visitors or whatever, as opposed to some festival with 5,000 visitors or less. Yeah, there is a little bit of this weird, how to say, injustice in a way. I mean, it doesn't feel fair that the smaller ones are being bullied and the bigger ones, well, we kind of tried to protest. So once again, it kind of pretty much proves when you have enough money, when you have enough influence, when you are literally too big to fall, you can do all kind of stuff. Now, what remains to be seen, obviously nobody knows what the answer is going to be. Can Tuska even further push the boundaries? Because now the city of Helsinki, where Tuska is hosted, they kind of slapped it on the wrist, saying like, you probably should not have done it. And Tuska was like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Shit happens. Now, will they push the boundaries? Will they take even further risk to see if they can get away with even sketchier bands than this one the next time? That will be interesting. And if they can smaller bands, smaller events, organizers, can they do the same? Or will it once again be, if you are part of the elite, welcome to the club, hey, you have special rights, and the rest of you will go to the jail. I'm obviously exaggerating here, but still the point remains the same. So I feel there are different standards for the bigger and the smaller, pretty much like it always has been, the poor versus the rich. Now, technically speaking, I'm neither, so I can't really represent the poor people no more than I can represent the rich, because I think someone is going to mention something like, hey, you also middle-aged guy in a middle-class environment, so what do you know? Hey, I've been a poor student. I know something about it. But once again, it will be interesting to see how things go in the future. Like, can the big ones just get out of jail card, or will this actually push them back a little bit so that next time they will consider it twice? That remains to be seen. Now the question is to you, dear audience, do you have similar experiences? Have you seen this kind of stuff happening in your home country, assuming you're outside of Finland, like I guess the most of you are? And if you know such events, please tell me about it so we can discuss it further. I'm more than happy to learn if there are other festivals doing the same and getting away with it, or if there are festivals who tried, get out of the jail, but actually, got protested in an efficient way. Looking forward to hear from you. What do you think about it? Leave it in the comments box below, and I'll get back to you if there is enough content to make more content. So, off you go. Bye-bye.